question. What do you consider to be the importance of freedom of expression?
Well, it's almost a self-evident question. People should be free to express themselves. Self-expression is the basis for the flowering of civilization. Anytime you have dictatorships of the left or right that cut that off, civilization suffers, society suffers. New ideas don't percolate. New visions don't get a chance to be shared. It's really, the question should be turned around, and the people who want to advocate censorship or prohibition or some sort of regulation, it's really the incumbency should be on them to say why free expression should not flourish. Because if they really are the ones who have the difficult argument to prove.
That's fine, let me jump over here.
Oh, alright.
So this one can play one noise.
Oh, good idea. What's over your kids, man?
A little bit of free expression over here.
Free expression, yeah, I thought we just clamped down. Yes.
So, I mean, look at that. Free expression is very natural. It has to be beaten out of you in government compulsory schools.
Okay, how does the law on freedom of expression in the USA differ from that in the UK?
Well, obviously, we have one thing that you do not have in Great Britain, and that is we have a Bill of Rights with the First Amendment that explicitly says Congress shall make no law abridging freedom of the speech or of the press. It also talks about freedom of assembly and freedom of religion. And that helps. It's nice to have a principle saying that government does not have a right to interfere. But of course, governments for the past 2 centuries at the state and national level have interfered or attempted to interfere. And then the First Amendment becomes the place of final appeal when individuals, dissenters, journalists, newspapers, magazines have had an attempt by some government to censor or regulate them. They have appealed through the courts, and because the First Amendment is so explicit and so clear, there's been a whole body of law which is defended, which is developed to defend the rights of any individual to speak out, to publish freely without having to get permission from some government bureaucrat or politician. But of course, people who want to censor other people pop up in every land, and people who want power over other people and who don't want independent voices speaking out against them are a constant tendency in human affairs. So there really is a similarity between the United States and Great Britain, like any other culture around the world. It's a constant battle between those who want to support the people's right to speak freely, to think freely, to debate freely, and those who are afraid of that for some reason, because it might challenge their power. And so, whether you have a Bill of Rights or not, that tension is always going to be there. Perhaps a Bill of Rights helps. I'd recommend it would be a good idea for England to have a Bill of Rights, but that alone would not solve all of your problems with the threats from government regulation of the press, unfortunately.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, that's fine. Okay.
I think it's fine.
I got real clear.
It's certainly very audible.
Okay, right.
I mean, there's background noise there, but you can hear what's being said. There's no difficulty.
Right, that's excellent. Okay, what is the relationship between freedom of expression and property rights?
Well, you know, over the past generation or two, a lot of people have wondered why some of these socialist societies that had noble constitutions and bills of rights that in principle, in their flowery words at least, said yes, there should be freedom of the press. But the reality was there was no freedom of the press in these countries. And people said, why isn't there freedom of the press? We model our Bill of Rights on America, and yet we don't have the same freedoms that you have in America. Well, the answer, part of the answer, is that a Bill of Rights is just a piece of paper unless it reflects a real reality, which is that there's a vibrant culture with many independent power centers, not just one central government controlling everything and funding everything. If the government owns all the newsprint and owns all the printing presses and all the radio and TV stations, it's obviously not going to give some of that to dissenters, to people who are going to attack the government. It goes against human nature or a politician's nature. That's why private property in printing presses, private property in a free marketplace in newsprint, and journalists being privately paid by many competing interests in a marketplace where there are many different newspapers and magazines, newsletters, flyers, radio and TV stations, film companies, all competing, expressing different points of view, where they have a right not just to freedom of the press, but they have somewhat of a free market system at least, with enough respect for private property so that their printing presses will not be expropriated by the government every time they do an expose of another politician dipping his hands into the till.
That's great. Okay, how would a free market broadcasting system work?
In the United States, we've not really had a full free market in the electronic media. And the Free Press Association, which is now 10 years old, has chosen broadcasting deregulation as one of its major areas for discussion and debate, because it's so crucial in our increasingly technological age that the dominant forms of communication and entertainment be allowed to compete, to flourish without the heavy hand of government regulating, censoring, and prohibiting it. Unfortunately, in the 1930s, when the Federal Communications Commission was established by Congress in the United States, the arguments for extending the First Amendment principle of free expression to the electronic industry were not very well understood. Most people thought, oh, we have this strange new thing, the airwaves, which somehow, because they're new, fangled, and scarce, cannot be assigned private property rights, and they have to be therefore regulated by the government. And this rationale of scarcity and public regulation was the original theory on which the radio and TV industry in the United States developed over the past half century. Of course, today, with hindsight, no one argues from the point of view of scarcity anymore, because there are hundreds of radio and TV stations, there's cable TV, there's video text, and increasingly people have come to see that the government regulation of the government control over the licensing of the radio and TV stations has had an incredibly chilling effect. And this is one reason why the kind of level of debate, the diversity of views presented on radio and television in the United States is so narrow and so superficial compared to the incredible feisty level of debate of all the different newspapers and magazines. And the difference is not because of some inherent difference in technology between private newsprint and electronic airwaves. It's because of the political control, the political pressure. And more people are calling for privatization of the airwaves, so that private broadcasters have an absolute right, free from government manipulation or threats to censor them, to broadcast. And then in a free market, there would be, exchange of sale of stations, and different groups would come in. There might be a conservative station, a liberal station, a socialist station, probably several Christian stations, probably a Hare Krishna station. The principle would be let 100 flowers bloom, let 1,000 flowers bloom. The problem with government as the gardener is it tends to choke off those flowers. Television and radio are too important today as a means of mass communication for the government to continue to have the power to regulate and control them. I think the free market would be a lot better. We'd see a lot more diversity, a lot more reflection of different people's ideas, rather than some an artificial narrowing because of what some particular government bureaucratic body said is permissible.
Okay, great. Following on from that, in the UK, what would you say to the argument that when you have a wider degree of freedom within broadcasting, the quality of television diminishes?
Okay.
Quality is a very loaded word. It has many subjective elements in it. The important thing is not whether one person thinks that a BBC series is somehow inherently superior to 30-something or China Beach or Hill Street Blues, which to my mind are three examples of outstanding American commercial television. The important thing is that if the government is the body that has the power to decide what quality is, if the government is the institution which has the power to fund or defund these programs, then you have a dangerous precedent. Then you have the subsidization of something which might be very well filled with quality, but it also is something which by the funding of that prevents the funding of something else. It takes resources away from the free market, and now it's resources that the government is deciding how it's being allocated. This is a very dangerous principle. I think that obviously just because something is popular doesn't mean it's great. There's incredibly bad television done by private broadcasters, also by government public TV stations. But the danger of government control that comes from government funding is something that people who really care about artistic freedom and who want to see cultural diversity really need to pay attention to. I believe that the most important thing is for art and entertainment to be something that's left up to private individuals, foundations, patrons of the arts. If they want to support filmed episodes of opera, which is not going to get very high ratings, that's fine if they want to do it on a non-profit private foundation station that might replace a public TV station in the kind of system I'm talking about. But I do not believe that people are so crude that without being force-fed this artificial diet of government-funded elite art, that they're just going to always choose Benny Hill over the School for Scandal. I just don't believe that. I believe that people who take that attitude have a fundamental contempt for people and don't think highly enough of people's desire for diversity, for not only for entertainment, but gradually for entertainment as they develop their taste that challenges them.
That's great. Okay. Are we okay?
Bit of tin tape.
Okay.